Hi guys, welcome back. So I've finally done it. I have used every shade in this palette and I am ready to talk about it and give you guys my full review of this thing. So let me just get right into it. So I'm sure you've all seen, everybody and their mom has shown this palette on camera. Ooh, camera inception. So this is the palette. It is the Conspiracy palette by Shane Dawson and Jeffree Star and collaborating together. Everyone knows kind of about this palette already, but I purchased it on release day, which was November 1st of 2019. So I've had it for about almost 3 months now, and I have really made a significant dip in some certain shades, and other ones was a real struggle for me to try and figure out how I was going to use them. But I did tell you guys when you picked this palette for me to review that I would make sure that I tried every single shade before I gave my opinion on the palette as a whole or on each individual shade, because if I didn't, try it, then I wouldn't really be able to tell you accurately what to expect. So today was the last day that I finally was able to use Cheese Dust. As you can kind of see that little bit of orange in my look today. That was the very last shade I had left to try. And all right, let me just start out by saying some overall thoughts about the palette. I think for the price point, which is like, I think it was about $60 or something like that. Like it's like a mid-range to high-end, kind of like in there kind of price point. I think for that amount of money, it's pretty worth it because the top row, as people have pointed out before, is very wearable. It's very everyday, neutral type looks. Then the bottom row is a more like glam type color story, but at the same time still very wearable, like not super adventurous. You don't have to be super adventurous to dip into those shades. And then the middle row is the one that's more like out there, for me anyways. But I think even just for the top row and bottom row alone, it would be worth it because the quality is really good. I will say there's a couple exceptions where I'm going to mention, not necessarily bothersome to me, but like certain shades had a couple issues that I'll get into when I go over each individual shade. But I think overall the quality is good for the price. Also, I want to point out that the pan size, if you've never bought a Jeffree Star brand palette before, you might be surprised by this because I know I was. This was the first Jeffree Star palette I ever bought, and I kind of expected the pans to be like a square version of, this is like a Too Faced palette, and like we all kind of know the standard sizes of the pans in there, and I kind of thought these would be roughly the same size but square instead of rectangular. And then I was really surprised to find out when I opened it that they're actually a lot bigger. So it's really hard to show this on camera to accurately reflect it, because I know like I saw a bunch of people showing it on camera and even still I didn't really notice how much bigger it was. But that's really the best way I can show you guys, is that the pans are like almost double the size of the ones in like a Too Faced palette or like kind of the standard pan size in most eyeshadow palettes. So if you wear a lot of eyeshadow, I think this is a good thing because you're getting obviously more product for the money. However, you could look at this as maybe a downside just because it's going to take a lot longer to go through it, and if you're not somebody who wears eyeshadow on like a regular basis, it might seem like more than you need. Like, like you might have preferred it to be slightly smaller pans for a cheaper price point, but it is what it is. This is the pan size they decided to go with, and for me, I think it's good. I think I will have no problem using at least the top row for sure. And like it's nice to, the packaging is a little bulky, as other people have said. It doesn't really fit super well into my like palette collection that I've got going on here. Like I usually just leave it here on my desk because it's too big to kind of fit on the tower. It's kind of awkward because I can't stack things on top of it because of the raised center part of it. Like otherwise I would put it somewhere in the middle of this tower maybe. But yeah, so it can be a little bit awkward, but depending on how you store your makeup, that might not be a problem. And yeah, so let me just go into kind of my experiences using this. So when I first got it, my first couple looks that I did with it, I right away started using kind of like the neutral top row. I did notice that the shades Tanacon and Diet Root Beer are a little bit, or like they are pretty warm toned when you actually swatch them. Like for me, like I don't know, I tend to do more cool tones just because I'm so pale, so like cool tones tend to work better for me. And that's kind of why it took me so long to use all the middle row shades, because they're all like, they're very bright, but they're also like all pretty much warm tones except for that green Conspiracy shade here, which was actually the first one of the middle row that I used just because it was more my style. But I will say, okay, so some criticisms about a couple of shades here. Out of all the shades, I'm sorry I'm holding it upside down, it's just easier for me, but I think you guys can figure it out. So Sleep Paralysis here. One criticism I have about that shade is it's very, very loosely pressed, like it's very powdery. So there's a lot of kickback and stuff, and even if you just swatch it with your finger, you'll be able to tell that it's like a lot softer than a lot of the other shades. I don't really mind that too much, like as long as you're careful with how you apply it. If you use a brush, don't like hammer it in, you know, then it tends to be fine. Like I think it's worth it because it's like actually probably my favorite shade in the whole palette, just in terms of how it looks. Like I love the color of it, it's gorgeous. So I know some people don't really like the powderiness of certain shadows, so I just wanted to mention that. Another one that I had a little bit of issue with was the shade Trisha, this hot pink right there. I did notice that that shade in particular does stain your eyelids or your skin after you use it. So again, doesn't really bother me because I know the next day I'm just going to slop on like a different color and it'll cover it up anyway. But for people that maybe do like a look for a special event and then don't really wear makeup on a regular basis, just keep that in mind that you're going to have like red eyelids afterwards for like a day or two. So that's kind of like a downside. Probably my favorite shades, and I think the most wearable for me personally, are, well, I said Sleep Paralysis is my favorite shade. It's like kind of got purples in it and like a purple undertone to it. It's really, really pretty. It's like a cool toned color, so that's like exactly what I go for. My favorite transition shade, a lot of people have used Tanacon. Like if you've seen a lot of other tutorials, a lot of people have used Tanacon as a transition shade, but I'm so white that I actually prefer to use My Pills. So this one has gotten a lot of use. The entire imprint is almost completely gone. I don't know if you can see that, but it's very like worn down because I use that one pretty much every time I reach for this palette. I use that one as my transition shade. Just a Theory has a pretty big dip in it. That's the one right there, just in the corner. I've been using that one quite a bit too. That one's a really, really pretty neutral shade. If you want like a shimmer, that one's really nice. And you know, they give you a matte black, which was easy for me to use, but also for me that's kind of a downside because I feel like there's like every palette throws in a matte black, and it's like once you have like even a very small palette collection of like maybe 3 palettes, you're gonna have a matte black for sure. So for someone like me who has like, I don't know, a dozen or more palettes, like I have enough matte black to last me a lifetime. So I'm kind of wishing that that had been switched out for a different color, but what can you do? So let me get into kind of the shades I struggled with trying to use, which was this middle row, other than the green one. The green one was easy. The pink one was kind of easy too. The first pink one, I should say. I feel like that's a more flattering pink, especially for someone of my skin tone, because I'm so pale. Like that Trisha shade was so much harder to incorporate because it's so bright and so pigmented, and like it's quite a deep pink, and I'm super pale. So on me, that just absolutely looks ridiculous. I did use it once, but I think out of all the shades in this whole palette, that one's probably my least favorite. It just doesn't really work for my skin tone. It stains, like I mentioned. It's just not for me. I did use it just so I could review it for you guys, and I'm glad I did because that's how I found out that it stains. But I don't see myself using that ever again. I don't know. It's really not my cup of tea. Now, food videos. The bright yellow. Okay. So when I use this, some of you might call this cheating, but I just could not. I stared at this palette for like 10 minutes or more trying to figure out how am I going to use that yellow, because I told everyone I was going to use every single shade, and this color is just, I'll swatch it for you guys, although I'm sure you've seen it before. It is such a vibrant, bright yellow. Like, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see it coming together on my skin tone. Like, I just felt like it looks terrible. I don't know how I'm going to incorporate that. It's so bright. It's so neon. So yeah, I decided the only way I could really use it would be to like, ooh, I'm way out of focus. How did that happen? Sorry. Okay, there we go. The only way I could really see myself using it is if I like kind of layered it underneath another color to create kind of like a different shade. So yeah, I know some of you guys are gonna be like, well, then you didn't really use it, but like I did, and I think this is a good option for somebody else like me who is like afraid to use it or thinks they're never gonna use it. It's a good way to actually like get some use out of it, and you can kind of make a shade that's not already in the palette. So I tried some different combinations. I tried like putting other colors over it. Some of them just were so opaque that they just completely covered up the yellow, and like in that case I feel like that would kind of be cheating, because it's like, well, now you don't see the yellow at all, and you're just using a different color. But I ended up finding a good combination that I felt like transformed the yellow into a different shade at the same time as not just covering it and looking like the original. So I'm just going to swatch what I did on my hand for you. So let me just get another yellow swatch so you can see the difference. Okay, so I've got sleep paralysis in the middle and like yellow on both sides, of course. So food videos. But what I did was I took sleep paralysis and I put it over top of food videos. And I'm just going to do that again on this hand here to show you the end result of like what that color combination kind of looks like. It ends up being like a grungy green kind of thing, like almost like an olive green. So that's what it looks like. So I feel like this doesn't really count as cheating because it's not completely covering it up to the point where it just looks like sleep paralysis, because in that case you just use sleep paralysis. But so you can still see the undertones of the yellow underneath, but I feel like this is so much more wearable and so much more like, I don't know, neutral and useful for like an everyday person than the original color of food videos, that bright yellow. I'm trying to get it to focus. There you go. It's kind of helping. But yeah, so that's how I was able to incorporate the yellow into my, like, even look on my finger. It kind of looks like a cool green kind of color. That's the one I used to mix the two. Yeah, so that was one way that I was able to use that food videos. I can't see myself ever, and I said this when I bought the palette, so it's not like this is a new realization, but I just can't see myself ever using food videos just on its own without turning it into some other kind of weird mixture of a color, because it's just not for me. And another one I tried really, really hard to use was cheese dust, which I used today. And I also did a bit of a layered thing with cheese dust, so I'll show you that as well on my hand. So I'll swatch cheese dust on its own. So that's cheese dust on its own, just two different swatches, but same color, right? And then what I did to get the orange that I have on my lid today, it's like not quite as in your face orange, is I actually took pigment, which is this this pretty pink, not Trisha, but the other pink, the more, see, that's pigment on its own. That's that's cheese dust on its own. And then I layered them, so I'll show you how that ended up looking. I mean, you can kind of see it on my eye already, but I layered them so that it was more of a pinky orange rather than just like this straight up orange. I thought that looked a lot nicer on me, and I think it works in this look that I did today. So yeah, so that's ended. Those are the two colors that I struggled the most trying to use, and then I thought this will be useful so you guys can see how I ended up using them in case you're also struggling to use them. So one other thing I want to mention is the shade Flaming Hot right here. To me, when I look at that, it looks like a red. I mean, unless I'm like colorblind, I mean, does that not look like a red to you guys? I mean, it looks red. But then when I swatched it, it turned out not to actually look like it does in the pan. So my hand's getting a little dirty here, but I'll just swatch it for you. So you see, when I swatched it, it's like almost like more of a deep pink. So that's something to keep in mind. Like if you were buying this palette because you really liked that like true red color, like just know you're not really gonna get that because it doesn't really swatch the same. Like it looks so much more orange, like so much more warm tone red, and then when you swatch it, it's really not that way at all. It's definitely pink. So that was one other criticism I had about this palette, just because obviously when you look at a palette, you want the colors, if it looks appealing to you enough to buy it, you're going to want the colors to show up how they look in the pan. And that's the only one I found in this palette that didn't really do that. Everything else was pretty true to what it looks like. But yeah, so hopefully this video was kind of helpful for you guys to see how you might be able to use some of those brighter shades in a more like wearable kind of way, and how you can make kind of different shades by mixing two colors together. I know it's like an extra step and it's a lot more work, and for that reason I probably wouldn't do it again unless I only had this palette to work with. Like I would just reach for something else in my collection. But for the purposes of this review, like I said, I wanted to use every single shade, and so for that reason I had to get creative. But yeah, overall good palette, worth the money I think. Let me know in the comments below if you have this palette, if there were any flaws that I didn't mention, like other shades that you found maybe were irritating to the skin or anything like that. None of that really happened to me except for that one shade that stained. But yeah, I'm curious to hear what you guys think about my suggestion of mixing colors together to get a new color if you don't like the intensity of the original color. But yeah, so this was the first of this series that I'm kind of doing with reviews, where I let you guys choose the palette and then I experiment with it for a month and then I do like a more in-depth review of it. So I hope you liked it. I'm going to be uploading another video in the next couple of days that's going to be my next review selection. So I'll give you like 3 or 4 palettes to choose from, and then you guys can comment which one you want me to do for the next month. I'm still sort of gathering them together to figure out which ones I want to include for that. So just stay tuned for that video, and like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one. All right, bye guys.